Welcome. Whether or not to trim your pot is a personal preference. I like trimming my pots because I just like the process, and I like the way that I can perfect the shape of my pot, and I like to be able to cut off any excess clay. I sometimes throw with a little bit too thick walls, sometimes on purpose because I need support at the bottom, and sometimes by accident. When I'm trimming, I can make my vases, my pots a lot lighter. And as I said, I just like the process. I also work a lot with textures. Some of them I apply at the leather hard stage, like chattering effects and things like that. And so all I just like trimming. But there is a challenge with trimming, because if you're trimming a normal bowl or something maybe like this. This is of course already glazed, so I'm not going to trim that. But if you're trimming something like that, it's very easy to just put it upside down when you do the bottom. And the other way, of course, when you do the top of it. But if you have to trim a vase with a thin neck, something like this, which is something I just thrown yesterday in porcelain, that's very difficult because, of course, you can't place it like that on the wheel. And even worse if it's with a even longer thin neck like this. I mean, of course, it's impossible to place it like that. So, in this video, I will show you how you trim a thin-necked bottle. To trim pots that have a thin or relatively thin top, you need a chuck. This is a chuck. This is just a piece of pot that I made. There's a hole in the bottom. You don't need that button. I don't fire them. I keep it just bone dry. I should probably have put it into a wet box or wrapped it up in plastic when it was leather hard, because it will be a little bit easy to work with if it's not completely bone dry. But this dried out for me. Anyway, you can do that. If you do fire them, put them in a bucket of water for 10 minutes or something, so it soak up the water. That will help the pot stick better to it when you use it. So basically, with a chuck, place it on the wheel head and center it. And then you can put your pot on top of it. That works great if you have, hold on a second, if you have a pot, something like this, which I'm also going to trim, that fits perfectly into this chuck. But if you have a pot with a longer neck like this, this is not going to fit. My neck is going to hit the button here. Of course, I could make different chucks. I could make bigger ones, higher ones, or I could even have one that fit into this to extend it. I don't have that right now, and I just thrown these pots yesterday, so it's too late for me to create a chuck for that. So what I found is that you can actually also use just a regular pot, something like this, something that is heavy enough. This is quite heavy, it's a stoneware. Heavy enough to be stable on your wheel, and long enough for your pot or your vase to fit. And in this case, you can see it's perfect sized even for this one with the long neck. So the way to work with this is that you need to, of course, center it on the wheel. I don't spend too much time centering it before I actually get the pot in there, because my pot could be a little bit uneven, so you need to send it anyway once the pot is in. But this edge, of course, is stone hard, and you don't want to leave any marks on the side of your pot, at least not any excessive marks. So, in order to protect your pot and also to kind of glue the pot onto the chuck, or the vase in this case, I use a little bit of clay. And remember to use the same clay that you used to throw the pot. So in this case, it's a porcelain. Otherwise, the marks that are left on your pot will be of a different color or even a different type of clay, like a stoneware. And that's not very good. So I use this clay and I build this little rim around it and massage it into the pot a little bit so it sticks. Now, with this, we have support for the pot. So let's take this long-necked vase, put it in here, and just, place it so it looks almost even. Now, in order to trim it perfectly, it needs to be leveled. To do that, I use this leveler. I picked this one up in a car shop. I think they use it to level camping wagons when they park them. It's very cheap in a car shop. I think I paid, I don't know, a couple dollars or something for it. 20 kroner in Denmark, I think. You can also buy it in Photoshop. They use it for leveling photo and cams. They're much more expensive. Or I think some ceramic shops have them too. Probably like 10 times the price. I buy it in my car shop. It's very cheap. I use that. It's a little leveler. There's a bubble in there, and when the bubble is in the middle, it's perfectly leveled on all angles. I put it on the top here, and to make sure that my pot is leveled. And then once it is, I press this clay into the side of the pot to make sure it doesn't move around. And don't be too afraid of leaving some marks, because as I said, it's the same clay that I'm using, and also it's very easy to trim it off or scrape it off, or even sponge it off afterwards. I already trimmed the top of this pot, but even though fixing those small artifacts that could come from this mounting clay is okay. So now we need to sand it, because now the pot is leveled and it's attached to my chuck. So now we can sand it. Sometimes you have, the clay on the bottom here moving a little bit in and out because you cut it off, and then some clay is hanging out over here, and so it can be difficult to see if it's actually centered. To help with that, before I even sand it, I just lightly take off any excess clay that's sticking out. Just let it roll on the side of it, because now we have an even surface here. So next thing is I keep my leveler here, because doing this, it may fall out of level, and I don't want that. So basically, you could use tap centering. I'm not very good with tap centering, so I'm not even gonna try and show you that. You can see other videos on YouTube about tap centering. What I do is I use my finger, I hold it here, and whenever I try and hold it as steady as I can, and I can see I need to move it just a little bit. If you're in doubt that it's in center, you can also use one of your trimming tools and just leave a small mark here. Now you can see on top here, if it's not even, if it's not the same width all the way around, then of course it's not perfectly centered. In this case, it is centered. So now I'm going to take a little more clay. This, of course, the other part of rounding the chuck could be any kind of clay. I'm using the same clay because I just took a chunk of that. Because now, of course, we need to secure that the chuck is not moving around. Just press it in here. So now we are ready to trim. In this case, with this particular pot, I know that I have way too much clay at the bottom, so I'm going to remove quite a lot. Also, I like it to have a thinner base, make it a little more round at the bottom. So I'm going to remove quite a lot there. I'm going to be using, to begin with, this tool from Hushin Tin that I'm using a lot. It's very nice, very sharp. think actually I need to use this one a little bit. See, this is what happens sometimes. Can get stuck to it, and then the chop moves around a little bit. But in this case, it was okay. It's a good idea to check now and then that your pot is still leveled, because it's very easy for you to push it a little bit. So I think we're getting close to the basic shape of it. It's always kind of tricky when you do trimming, because how much can you take off? You still want to leave the walls thick enough to sustain whatever purpose they have. But in my experience, you can take off more than you think you can. And in any case, I would say if you never trim through the walls, then you're not trimming enough. That's a good exercise to do that. Of course, then your base is destroyed. But as time goes, you will sort of get a better feel for it. For this vase, I want to make a small foot, not a very big one, but a small foot. So that's what I'm gonna do now. And I always like to make my foot a little bit like this. I think it looks good, but also when you are later going to glaze it, it's easier to grab on. Instead of if the foot were like this, it's very difficult to grab onto. To do the fine tuning of the trimming, I like to go back to these trimming tools from Hushin Lin. Okay, I'm not going to finish this outside now because I'm going to do the foot Once the foot is made, I will do the final touch on the outside. I start out by just making a mark, so I know, kind of where I want the foot width to be. Then I make a groove in that mark, so I have something to guide me through the rest of the foot trimming. The purpose of making the foot is, well, first of all, I think it looks nice, but also there's too much clay at the bottom of this particular vase, as I said, and I want to remove that to make sure that the bottom is not too thick. If it's too thick, there's a higher risk of it cracking, but also it makes the whole vase lighter. And keep removing the clay that you cut out. If you don't do that, it's going to be difficult to see what you're actually doing, and also tend to mess up your cutting. And be very careful to not press the tool too much. First of all, because if you do that, then you get sudden cuts into it, and it doesn't end up even. But also because if you press too much, there's a risk that you're actually going to bend the bottom inwards. So just scrape off thin layers, depending on how much you're going to take off. You've got to go quite a few rounds. At this point, I can see that the width of my foot rim is a little bigger than what I would like, and I can still scrape that. I mean, the thinner it is, the more elegant it looks. And for this vase, I would like it to be quite thin. How deep you can go is also a question of experience. You can tap it and listen to it. When it starts to sound a little more hollow, you're getting close to the limit. You could also use measurement tools. I showed you in a previous video where you measure the inside depth and the outside depth, and then you know how thick the bottom is. However, for a small neck vase, it can be difficult to get the tool in there. So in this case, you kind of have to judge it on tapping and experience. I think that's good. I like to finish off by burnish it a little bit with just with my finger, and just to make it very smooth at the bottom. I mean, nobody sees this, but except for potters that turns around pots, and I do it myself, and I just like it to look nice down there. And then final touch is to even out this very bottom part of your foot, and I think that's probably one of the most difficult ones. If you do it like this, it will jump up and down and don't make it even. The perfect way of doing it is actually cutting it from the side. Like this. That way you kind of cut it through and make sure that it's even. I like to use my shiny stone to just burnish it. Do it very, very light. Don't push it too much, because that's going to leave marks, and that's exactly not what you want. I also use my fingers. It's a nice burnish tool. I like to keep this as smooth as possible, keeping in mind that this is gonna sit on a table or in a window or something, and I don't want it to leave any marks. So now we got the foot perfected, and now we have to finish the outside. And for that, I'm just gonna continue with these tools. I try to leave a small groove in the corner between the foot and the side. That will help trap the glaze so it doesn't run over the foot. In this case, I'm just going to do the glaze until the foot and not on the actual foot. So that's going to help me separate the foot from the side and the glazing. Now I have the shape that I want, and to make it even more smooth, I use a metal rim, and scraping off just. I'm not actually doing any shaping. I'm just removing the marks, very tiny marks that I have from my trimming tools, and that will make it look even smoother. So, like this. And remember to keep moving the clay that you scrape off, otherwise it's just going to leave marks. And again, I use my finger to burnish the edges, and I'll make it smooth and nice. I sometimes also use a rubber sponge just to do the final touching of burnishing. It will make it smooth like silk, and especially with a porcelain. This is a high quality porcelain, and the particles in that is very, very fine. So using these burnishing tools, my fingers, shiny stone, the rubber rib, I can make it very, very smooth. Also, these vases are gonna get a layer of Terra sigillata, which I may talk about in another video, and it will be pit fired, which is a very interesting way of firing. I will probably make a video about that. We're going to do that in a couple of months. I'm just preparing pots for that now. But for the Terra sigillata to work, the surface needs to be very, very smooth. At least that's how I like it. And then when you put that Terra sigillata on, you will burnish it even more, so it will be very, very smooth. But because the Terra sigillata is a very, very fine particle clay, even the smallest inconsistency in the surface, any small cracks will just go through the Terra sigillata. It's not going to put a layer on like a normal glaze would do. So the last thing before I finish is my stamp. I have these small wooden stamps made. I think I might upgrade them to a brass stamp, a little more durable. So I'm just gonna leave this stamp in the foot here. That way. And now it's done. So be very careful when you remove it, because you don't want to smash your beautiful long neck into the side of your jug. And now it's done. And with the nice foot and everything. And I don't know if you can see it, but actually there's no marks left here. It's very, very smooth. It's very nice. So in this case, it turned out just perfect. That's all I had for today. I'm going to move on and trim my other pot. This with also a small neck, but not so big. And I'm not going to show you that because it's basically going to be the same thing as I did with the very long neck pot. I hope that you learned something from this and are inspired to go ahead and do lots of pots. As usual, I hope that you will subscribe to my channel. That will show me your support, but also you will get notified about new videos. And I have lots of new videos coming up. So I hope to see you soon again and have a great day.